All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking it out for the last session of the day on day 2. We appreciate it. We have Ant, who will be presenting no-code, low-code solutions for seamless protection with Jamf School and Jamf Protect. Take it away, sir.
Hey, thank you. So, huge title. I'm not going to say it again. I don't even know if I know what it is without reading it off the slide. But we're basically going to be talking today about Jamf Protect and Jamf School. So, like the title suggests, we will be talking a lot about those two things. But we're actually going to be talking about a process and a workflow that's going to take Jamf School out of its kind of confines, out of its box that it's kind of able to do natively, and really start to make it do some really nice workflows. And we're going to do that by using some third-party tools. Now, some of these tools might be new to some of you, and we're going to go pretty quickly with some of this stuff, and we're going to go pretty deeply, and we have only got a certain amount of time. So it's kind of okay if what happens today in this session doesn't go in that very first time. Rewatch the recording. I've got some QR codes or some links at the end with some resources that goes over how to configure this literally step by step. What I would really like you to do is enjoy the IT magic that we're going to use today, what we're going to do, and kind of really be sparked by the idea behind the workflow that we're creating. And then, you can come back and really look at the elements to make this work. So don't worry that if, when you're watching this for that very first time, it kind of passes you by a little bit. Just enjoy the ride and remember, it's the workflow that's going to be important here today. So a couple of things that I want to just talk about Jamf Protect specifically. Jamf Protect does a lot of things. For today's session, we're really only going to focus in on threat prevention, analytics, and alerts. That's not to say we can't do more with this kind of workflow, but that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, one of the other great things about Jamf Protect is that in conjunction with Jamf Pro, admins can create automated workflows that run after a given alert is triggered after a particular severity level. The Jamf Protect agent talks directly to the Jamf Pro agent that then triggers a workflow that's already been created in Jamf Pro. That gives us that seamless protection for your endpoints. Only, you remember this session isn't about Jamf Pro. It's about Jamf School. And many of you all know that Jamf School doesn't have a macOS agent for Protect to talk to. So we can't create any of these automations. Sure, we can do it manually by sitting somebody in front of a dashboard, but it's not really an automation, I wouldn't say, and it's definitely not seamless. So there is no communication between the two of them. I told you it was going to be a pretty intense session. Thank you for coming. We'll see you later. Oh, no, wait, right, hang on a second, right? I did say we were going to apply some IT magic. So we're going to do the rest of the session, or for the rest of the session, we're going to do the thing that I've just said that we couldn't do. And the question that you should be asking yourself is, well, how are we going to do that? And that's where the no-code, low-code solution comes in. So if you're not familiar with a no-code, low-code solution, the concept's pretty simple. It's the idea that it's super user-friendly. There's no specific language or coding needs that you have to have. You don't need to know a specific language or anything like that. It's useful to have a bit of understanding of how coding logic works and things like that, but there's no specific language required. And that's due in part to the fact that they have predetermined code blocks that kind of stack together and one thing flows into another, but it means that you don't necessarily need to know what the code behind it is. You just know that you need to use a particular code block. They're actually great for creating automations between surfaces that don't ordinarily talk to each other. There's a big clue there, what we're going to do here. And I guess the big question that we always get when we look at these things is, why is it no code, low code? What's the difference? Well, I'd like to say you would never have to use any code at all, but depending on what you're doing, you might need to use just a little bit, but it's not going to be a huge amount. Like I say, you don't need any language requirements to know how to code some of this stuff. You've probably heard of some of these no-code, low-code platforms. If you aren't familiar with them, you've probably still heard of them. There are a couple of big ones here on screen, so Power Automate, Talk, Okta Workflow, but that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the kind of services that do this. Now, which one you should use and which one is best for you and what features compare and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of down to you to do that kind of research, and ultimately, they all do the same thing. For today's session, because this is focused in on education and many of our customers are Microsoft houses, we're going to use Power Automate, which is Microsoft's version of a no-code, low-code platform. But again, I must stress, this could be any other platform that is a no-code, low-code platform, as long as they can do things like interact with APIs, which is basically what they all do. So you choose what works for you. For today, we're going to use Power Automate. So as you can see, that communication that we've marked out at the top suddenly becomes possible if we add Power Automate into this flow. We'll get Jamf Protect to talk to Power Automate. Power Automate will do some things and talk back and forth to Jamf School. And we've suddenly got that communication bridge back to us again, which allows us to create these automations. Before we get going in, there are some requirements here. The first bucket's pretty simple. Platforms. You're going to need access to Jamf School. You're going to need access to Jamf Protect. And you're going to need access to a no-code, low-code platform, in our case, Power Automate. The next bucket is knowledge. So although we said it's a no-code platform, it is going to be useful if you know how to work with the Jamf School API or if you've done that before. And as part of the example, we are going to do some basic bash scripting. So again, if you're comfortable with that, that's fantastic. And then the third bucket is tools. So we're going to use these three tools here. We're going to use Swift Dialog to do something on the end user device as part of our example. We're going to use Postman and then something called Jamf Check to help us build and test our flow as we go along. So what are we going to do? What's the outcome of this test workflow that we're going to build? I want to create custom notifications on the end point, the user's device, when Jamf Protect triggers a low, medium, or high severity event in Jamf Protect. I want the notification to be different within each severity level. So I want a different notification for low, different one for medium, etc. I also don't want custom notifications for the built-in Jamf Protect function of threat prevention, because Jamf Protect has its own notification, and I don't want any notifications at all for any events that are just informational. And I want to do that in this kind of a flow. We're going to send some information to Power Automate. Power Automate is going to then make that decision of whether or not Jamf Protect has already blocked the thing. Then we're going to filter out anything that is informational, any informational alerts. We're going to apply some logic, which we haven't got to, and we don't really know what that logic's going to be yet, but we're going to apply some logic to that, where we end up creating an API call to Jamf School, and Jamf School will then trigger that particular workflow to present the users with a notification. So the pieces of the puzzle that we've got here, the end user device, Jamf Protect, Power Automate, and Jamf School. Something will happen on the device. It will trigger an event. It will talk to Jamf Protect, who will talk to Power Automate, and it goes around that way. The result is there's going to be a custom notification on the device. So let's get cracking with this. This is what Power Automate looks like if you've never used it before. So we're going to click on a new flow, and we're just going to skip the setup assistant. The first thing that we need to do is say, hey, Power Automate, you are going to receive some information. So we want a trigger, something that's going to trigger our flow. That's the block that we want. So we're going to search for something called a trigger block. And there's a couple of things that you can see in this trigger block. The first one's going to be that you want to, in the drop-down box, choose anyone. Okay, we don't have to put a username and password in to trigger this flow. We want anybody to be able to trigger this flow. There's a box here as well that's grayed out at the moment that's called your HTTP URL. This is going to become really useful, but it's not available until we hit save. But we are going to come back and have a look at that afterwards. And then finally, we've got that last box here that kind of says, I need to know what data I'm receiving and what that data looks like. And we can provide a sample to Power Automate. We can type the sample data in if we like, but that's prone to errors, and depending on the data, it could be quite large. So this is where our first tool to help with testing comes in. That's something called Postman. If you've never used Postman before, it's a tool that's really great for testing APIs to see what kind of data you need to send and receive from a given service. You can then create and share those collections that you create. And one of my colleagues here at Jamf has created a Jamf Protect data kit, and it basically simulates the data that Jamf Protect will send to the service so that we can trigger that. So this is going to be great for testing because I don't actually have to start to do malicious things on my end user device to test the flow as we go along. We're going to use this sample data instead. So when we open up the collection, you can see there's lots of different options. We can choose all kinds of different events and all those kind of things to help us test our flow. Here we're going to try and find something that has been prevented by Jamf Protect already. And all we're going to do is take that body request there, copy it, and paste it directly into Power Automate. What Power Automate then does, which is really clever, is it takes that information, it doesn't use like the serial number that you provided, for example, but it understands that there's going to be an object called serial number, and that that serial number object is going to contain a string or an integer or whatever that data might be. So it doesn't actually use the data you've given it. It just infers the object and the kind of data type it's going to be. And that's it. That's our first code block. Next, we're going to add a next code block, so we're going to add another action. Like I said, Power Automate comes with a whole heap of different code blocks. So the best thing to do here is to use the search box to find the kind of blocks that you need. We're going to use one that's called a condition. And the condition block is, if true, do something, if false, do something else. Now, it makes sense that in order for Power Automate to be able to make a decision, you have to say what you want to make a decision on, what the condition is that you want to evaluate. If we tap in that box, you'll see that there's a little thunder icon that we have there. This is where the magic starts to happen. When we click on that, then we see that we can search for that data that Jamf Protect is going to send to Power Automate. Now it knows and understands what the data is. So in this case, we want to choose the object that's called blocked. And we want to set that to true. If it's true, we want it to do one thing. If it's false, we want it to do something else. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, this feels pretty code-like still, I'm just going to flip to the tab here that shows what that code for just that true false statement is. It's 18 lines of code. Now, I would still much prefer to hit a GUI and hit a drop-down than remember 18 lines of code. Remember, that's just for that last code block. So this is what I mean about no code, low code. It still feels a bit codey, but it really isn't compared to what the actual code is there. So we've got a really simple flow now. It's time to save it and test it. When we do save it, that original trigger that I said that was a grayed out URL is now available for us, and I'm going to copy that. And then we're going to head back over to our app, to Postman. This is how we're going to test this flow as well. So we're going to go away and find an event that has been blocked by threat prevention, and we're going to take that URL we've just copied and popped it in the very top box there. The box says it's got a token in it or a variable that says URL at the moment. We're just going to paste our URL we've copied into there. Then when we hit send, this is going to send that information from this simulation here to Power Automate, and Power Automate is then going to start to process that data. We can see that it's been tested. It gives us a running history of 28 days of when it's been tested. And you can see if it's failed or succeeded or not. And on this very small example here, you can see that it's got a tick on these code blocks. And if we click into that a bit further, you can see whether or not that was a true or false event that happened. And we're going to continue to build out and test this in a very, very similar way as we go along. So with our test complete, we're going to do our second condition. The first one, we're going to filter out whether or not Jamf Protect has done something or blocked something automatically. The next thing we're going to do is add another condition, because we need to filter out any of that informational details that we don't want either. And just like before, we're going to use the information we know Jamf Protect is going to send to Power Automate. And this time we're going to do severity level. Now, we're going to set the severity level to 0, because that means informational events. With Jamf Protect, the information that gets sent, if it's a level 1 severity, it's a low level, level 2 is medium, and 3 is high. But for informational, it's 0, so we want informational to be 0 there. So we're going to test this again. This time, we're going to choose an event that hasn't been blocked by threat prevention, and we're going to seek out the severity in that body of text and change it to something above 0. Now, if you can't find an event that has already been blocked by threat prevention, remember, this is simulated data. So you can just go into the body and type in blocked and make it true instead. It doesn't really matter. It's just simulated data. Remember to add your URL at the top, the one that will trigger the flow. Go away and hit send. And this time when we look at the test, you'll see we've got a few more ticks, but it's been routed the way we expected. It hasn't been blocked by Power Automate, and its severity is over 0. So we can start to see that's routing through the right way. So now we've filtered out the information that we don't want for our flow, it's time to start to think about the things that we do want to do if the event gets to this far. So it's time to look at the bit here where Power Automate talks to Jamf School, because that's kind of where we are in the flow here, right? And how are we going to do that? Well, of course, we're going to do that using the Jamf School API. So it's time to use Postman again. At the end, when I give you the link, I've created a Postman collection for Jamf School API. It's pretty much the same, everything that's in the documentation, but you can try it pretty easily. And we're going to use this right now to figure out how to add devices to a static group. So when I find the endpoint to do that, there's a couple of things that I can see. The first one being that I must have the UDID of the device. Now, in Jamf Protect, when we look at the data it actually sends the serial number. So we're going to need to do a little bit more investigation to the Jamf School API to get the UDID of the device. If I try and just list the device, if I look at the endpoint, I still need the UDID, so that's going to be no good for me. But if I list all of the devices, so I want to list all the devices in my instance, I can add a query or a filter to that, and there I can use a serial number. With that response that I get back, I do get the serial number, and with the response, I get the UUID. So if I send a list of devices, I say ask for a list of devices, filter it by the serial number, I will get back that UUID of the device that I need. So that step 3 is actually 3 different steps. I first have to get Power Automate to ask Jamf School for the list of devices. It will then give me back the information that says this is the UDID of the device, and then I can create an API call to add this to a static group. Before then, we add the rest of it a little bit later on. Okay, so under the false action, we're going to add a block that's called HTTP. This is basically how we perform an API call within Power Automate. I need to know what I need to add to that HTTP block, how I'm going to make that API call. And again, if I go to Postman here in that collection that I built, you'll be able to see that you can collect all the data that you need. So you basically need your base URL, the URL of your Jamf School instance. And here we'll be able to see that you need /API/devices, and then we need to add that query, so there's a question mark where we have to add the serial number. So if we go back over to Power Automate, we can start to build this out. Apart from the serial number that we need to query is going to be different every time the device triggers this. It's not going to be a static piece of information. So again, what we can do is use the power here in Power Automate to use part of that URL to be static, because it's always going to be your Jamf School instance, and then use some dynamic data here for the serial number. As you can see, we'll be able to pull out the serial number, and then we can use that, and every time it updates, it'll be a different serial number. You need to fill out any of the other requirements for that API call, which I'm not going to go into right now, but the Jamf School documentation is a good place to go for that when it comes to API and what you need. But remember that you're going to need to fill out also the authentication method there at the bottom. Don't forget that, otherwise nothing's going to work at all. Now, at this point, we're going to add some error handling into it, just because we can. If you've used an API before, you know when you get an API call, you always get a status response to whether or not it's succeeded or not. And we're going to use that to make sure that before we do anything else, we are going to we actually have some data we can act on. So we're going to add another one of those condition blocks, those true and false blocks. And we're going to set that status, so the object, that status, to 200. And we're going to say if it's 200, therefore it's succeeded, we're going to move on, else something else has gone wrong. And in our point, we're just going to kick out of the flow. In the real world, we would probably want to send an email to somebody to say, hey, this has gone wrong, you still need to look at this manually, but for our process, we're just going to end the flow. The thing is, the API call that we've made and the data that we get back is just a big blob of data again. Like that first call that we made, we need to tell Power Automate, hey, there is a format to this data, we need to format this. So we need a block that's called parse.json. And we can provide it, like we did before, with some sample data. Again, Postman, we'll go and make the actual API call with Postman. And in the body response, we copy that, paste it into Power Automate. We use that sample data because we're not writing it out manually. We don't want all those possible errors. And then Power Automate will do as it did before. It will infer the objects and the data types based on the data that you give it. But you must tell it, it's not a big blob of data. I want you to convert it into objects that I can physically use in the future to build actions on. So now that we've parsed that object, we basically need to say, if we have succeeded, if we've received some data, this is when we're going to start to do some things in the action. This is where we're going to start to actually create the workflows that we want, depending on which severity level that we have. So we're going to use a block that's called a switch, and the best way that I can describe a switch block is kind of like an if, else type of concept. If it's this, do this. If it's something else, do something else. And the first box that we're going to add is our low severity. So we want it to be switching on that severity object that we got from Jamf Protect again. So this is the Jamf Protect data that we're switching this on. And then we can change the severity value, remembering that we're doing the low group, so it's going to be 1, because 1 equals low, 2 equals medium, 3 equals high. We then repeat that process for the medium and the high group, adding 2 and 3 to the relevant things. This is how we're going to add the device to a static group in Jamf School. But of course, in order to do that, we must have the groups, the static groups themselves in Jamf School. So don't forget to create them. For my purposes, I've sort of tagged them with protect at the beginning of the group name so that I know what they're for, or my other admins know what they're for. It's going to be useful to search for them in the future. And when I say the future, I mean in like the next step. So when I look at the API call to add the device to a static group, not only does it say the device must have the UDID and not the serial number, it's not the group name that I'm adding these to either, it's the group ID. But again, using Postman, I can list all of my groups from Jamf School, and because I've tagged them with protect at the beginning, I can use the find functionality to find what my group's there, and I can match out the IDs. And I would just simply note those IDs next to those groups. It can be just written down, that's fine, as long as you note that the group that's for your low group has got this ID, you'll be all fine. Next, we then start to have to add these to the actual group. So again, what you've got here is your HTTP block that is going to do the call. We're going to make sure that we add the right URL or endpoint there. And this time we need to add a body of text. Okay? That's just how this API call works. The group ID, the group that we're going to move it to, is always going to be the low group when it hits in this level. So the group ID can be static, but the serial number of the device or the UDID of the device is going to be changing each and every time. So we'll use dynamic data again for that. You can see here that you could have used the dynamic data by going away and looking for the serial number that we got back from the API call from Jamf School. Remembering that now I'm getting information from Jamf Protect and Jamf School, so I'm making sure that I'm hitting the right thing at the right time. So in Postman, I'm now back at the Jamf Protect data set, and I'm going to find a trigger because we're going to test it. I'm going to find something that's going to be able to trigger this and trigger it into the low-level group. And for my purposes, I'm going to change the serial number to a serial number that's actually live in my Jamf School environment that's a test device, because I want to make sure that it actually moves the device into the right group as well. I'm going to make sure the severity level of this is 1, because I want it to land in that low group, and I'm going to hit send. Again, if I then go back to Power Automate and look at the test, you should be able to see the ticks there that filter all the way down to the low-level group. And if I go to Jamf School, you'll see that I now have a device in that group from the API call. I then repeat this process for the medium and low-level group, medium and high-level groups. So, a lot of detail there. I did say we're kind of going to go and do lots of in-depth detail, but this is the flow if we try and simplify this a little bit. We receive data in Power Automate. The first thing it says is, did Jamf Protect automatically protect this with threat prevention? If yes, stop the workflow. If no, was the severity level of that event informational? If yes, stop the workflow. If no, go and quiz Jamf School to find out what its UDID is. Did we successfully get data? If no, bail out of the flow. If yes, we're going to parse the data, apply some logic with the information that we've now got from Jamf School and Jamf Protect to create a different API call depending on whether it was medium, low, or high. And then that will trigger something with Jamf School that we've yet to define still. And that's now the part that we're going to look at. How are we going to actually trigger the workflow in Jamf School? So for this example, I built a fairly simple script that uses Swift dialog to display a different dialog depending on the severity level. And I basically just have to hard code in that severity level at the top because I want to use the same script each time because I don't have to write a different script depending on everything. It's much easier to keep up to date with this script, and then just build the logic in at the end that provides the different notification depending on your severity level. So once you've got your script, which again will be available to you at the end in the resources, we just add this to Jamf School. If you've never done this before, you need to make sure you've turned on the scripting module. And then once you've got that, you've got a menu item that you can just go away at that top corner there and press Create Script. You want to make sure that it's only ran once, and you also want to name it something useful. So this is our low-level severity group that we're going to add this to. So I'm going to call this my low-severity script as well. Simply copy and paste the script into the box, making sure that we add the 1 to that severity level there, and then we scope this script to our low-severity group. So essentially what we're saying here is if you land in this low-severity group, I'm going to run a script and give you the low-severity notification that I've written into there. And then, of course, you just build the same thing, the same process, but changing that number in the script for our medium and high-level ones as well. So if we were to run this right now, and we ran it the very first time, this would all work exactly as we needed it to. However, on a rerun of the same device landing in the same group, all would work right the way up until we told, hey, Jamf School, please run this script on this device. And Jamf School would kind of go, kind of already did. Because if you remember that script, we said only run once. But we want to run this multiple different times, right? So there is one extra step that we need to do, and that is once we've displayed the notification, we need to reset the state of that device. So we need to actually take that device out of that smart group as well. Now, I'm going to save you the time because also, there's quite a lot going on here, and I haven't got time to go through this completely, but that's where no-code, low-code can help as well. Okay, we simply change the script just a little, that once it's displayed the notification, it has a different functionality in there that says, I'm now going to trigger this second flow and remove this from the group. You're also going to need to add some slightly different things in the script here just to do with your IDs of your groups that you've already got. But essentially, by doing that, you can create a reset state afterwards. So if that device ever triggers that type of alert again, it will always run the flow or the script that you've run here, that you've created here. So we've got all the bits in place now, bar one. So far, everything that we've done has been with Postman and that simulated data. If we're going to take this into a live environment, we want live data from Jamf Protect. So there's one thing that we need to do in Jamf Protect in order to get it to send this data through to our Power Automate workflow. What you need to do here is you need to go down and find your actions, and then you can create a new action, or you can amend one that you already have. But in the actions page, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a portion where you can go away and add an alert collection point. So basically what it says here is once we have this alert in Jamf Protect, I'm going to populate the dashboard and everything in Jamf Protect console, but I'm then also going to forward all that data to the thing that you want me to forward it to. Now, although we have built-in logic in our script and our flow to ignore informational data, that was because we could. We don't have to actually send that informational data to the flow at all. So in this case, I'm actually just going to do medium to high, low to high, but you might find there are occasions where you want to send that informational data as well. Up to you, up to your flow. So what does this actually look like on the end user's device? What does this look like for the end user? So this is finally where our last tool comes in from a testing point of view, because again, we still don't really want to be triggering these malicious things when we're doing the test. So we're going to use something called Jamf Check. Now, Jamf Check is an app that kind of does what it says on the tin. It checks the status or if a Jamf app or service exists on a device, as well as being able to pick out a load of things from the device in terms of device details as well. You'll be able to see in the menu item there that you can check things like what MDM it's in this case it's in Jamf School, and when you look at Jamf School, you'll be able to see, has it got the student app installed, has it got the teacher app installed, has it got safe internet installed, for example, some things like this. But for our purpose here, there is also a tab for Jamf Protect. And in the Jamf Protect tab, we have the ability to trigger alerts and detections without actually doing anything malicious on the device, which for our testing purposes, again, is going to be fantastic. So let's test this on this end user device. We've got Jamf Check open, and we've got the Jamf Protect window open. And we're going to go away and hit that trigger detections button here in a second. And what you'll see is these are some actions that we can run safely on the device. And they've all got different severity levels. And we need to test different severity levels because we've got different actions depending on those severity levels. So this is going to be great for us. The first thing that we're going to go away and try and test is what happens if Jamf Protect automatically stops the detection through threat prevention. In our theory that we wanted at the beginning here, we shouldn't get any additional notification other than the standard Jamf Protect notification that we expect, right? Which is what we've got here. This is expected behavior. We haven't got anything custom here. This is what you get straight out of the box anyway, which is great. That means our logic has worked so far. We haven't got anything additional. The next thing that we're going to do is go away and trigger that low-level severity event. Now here, remember, when we hit run, the device is going to inform Jamf Protect. It's done that low-level severity. It's going to go to Power Automate. It's going to where all the logic happens. It's going to be put into a particular smart group, and then maybe we hit play. You might find what it does. Then we'll trigger that option there. So if we go away and do this, you'll see we've got our low-level notification. This is a notification that the end user would not normally get if they have triggered a low-level event. So we're able to give information to the user that they've perhaps done something they shouldn't do as well, which is great. So if we continue to do this, we'll go through our medium severity. This should have a different notification. But again, without this flow, we wouldn't get a notification at all. So let's try this out. Remember, again, we are triggering these events safely. We're not doing this maliciously, so it's great for testing purpose. Here you can see it's a medium level event. So this time it's a bit of a different notification where the user has to perhaps look over our acceptable use policy and remember the things that they should and shouldn't do, and that's maybe why they're getting this notification. And then they can dismiss that when they're ready. And then finally, we're going to test the high-level event. So this is something that has triggered that level 3 severity. This should give a separate notification again. So we'll go ahead and run this. Only this time, of course, it's the worst event that you can have at all, right? A high-level severity event means that you could have a compromised device. So in my case here, I have absolutely locked the screen out so that the user can't do anything and said, please, can you contact IT? Because this is something we want the user not to touch anymore. They might be compromised. So you can see here, we've got everything that we wanted to do. We've got a different notification depending on the severity level. Only this session says seamless protection with Jamf School and Jamf Protect. And at this point, you might be thinking, presenting end users with a notification is not protecting my devices. And you'd be right. And that's because the important thing, remember I said at the beginning, is not the thing that we're doing, but the workflow that I'm showing you here. The actions that we've taken today are just informational actions for the end user so that they know they've done something wrong. We're not doing anything additional to protect the device. In the real world, we absolutely, of course, would. So what are some of the things that we might do if we had a high-level event? So what we might do is add some additional MDM configuration as part of this action when you land in that group. Now, that could be by adding more profiles to lock down the device more, or removing profiles to prevent access to certain parts of a resource, network resource, for example, or parts of the operating system or something like that. So that is something that you would do. But you wouldn't stop there. If this was a high-level event, you might also deploy other scripts and tools. So for example, you might deploy something called Aftermath, which is an incident response tool that collects a load of data and logs from the device prior to that incident happening, so somebody can go away and filter through that and analyze that information to find out if there has been a compromise. But we don't have to stop there either. Remember, a no-code, low-code platform is about connecting services that don't normally communicate with each other, or perhaps other services that you've got in your stack. So for example, we're using Power Automate, so let's assume that this particular user is a Microsoft house. As well as doing those other two things, because we're not sure if there is a compromise, we could also lock the user's account from Office 365 and sign them out of any active sessions. So if there is a compromise, we know that we've secured that too. And in addition to this, because it's a high-level alert, what we might also do is with Slack or Teams or email, do an automated message to the IT department to say, this device with this user has had this compromise. They've had their device locked down. Can you please get in touch with them because you need to go and analyze that device? Now, adding all those actions together, what we would do in the real life, you can see you really are starting to add this seamless protection to this workflow. The notifications that we did today was just something that was easy for us to see. We had different events happening depending on the severity level. And of course, it's always good to inform the user that they've done something to help inform them and help with their education of making sure they use their devices a bit better as well. But ultimately, putting notifications on a device isn't what's going to protect it. It's when you're using actions like we can see here that's really going to change the game for you. So I guess to wrap up, we've seen how to build seamless automation now between the two. It's not IT magic, right? But if it is the first time that you have seen some of these things, some of these tools, I'm hoping that what we've done here today has sparked an idea. And I really don't care if the idea has nothing to do with Power Automate at this point. If I've inspired or you've had the spark here and you've understood that you can use Swift Dialog with Jamf School and you've never known that before, that's something that I'd like you to take away. If you've never used Postman before and you want to explore the API, and that's what you're going to take away today, I want you to take that away today as well. And the reason is because now you've seen this workflow, it will be in the back of your mind. And I know it will because the first time that I saw a no-code, low-code platform was at JNUC 2021. It was just after I joined Jamf. And at the time, I can tell you for a fact, I'd never heard of Postman. I wouldn't dream of doing anything that was script-based, okay? And I definitely didn't understand what the no-code, low-code platform was definitely doing. But along the way, over this last 3 years, as I've got more knowledgeable and I've started to understand things, I've always gone back to the fact that that looked like a really cool concept. I'm glad that I sat through it, even if I didn't grasp it that first time. And here we are 3 years later. Once I understood all the pieces of the puzzle, and the first thing that I wanted to do was create that seamless protection between Jamf School and Jamf Pro. Jamf School and Jamf Protect even, should we say. So I really want to say, if this has been a bit full on for you, and you kind of feel like, wow, this was a lot, I've got a whole load of resources, and I really do mean I've done a step-by-step, this is how this works, at that resource at the top there. But like I say, if what you're taking away today is, hey, Postman's really cool, hey, Swift Dialog with Jamf School I didn't realize was possible, that's also fine too. As long as I've kind of G'd you up to go away and explore more, then please keep coming back to this resource or rewatching the session when it's available to get to the point where you can use these seamless integrations with Jamf Protect and other services as well. That's the thing, we're breaking Jamf School out of the box here. So with that, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? A lot. Ones that you want us to talk on the microphone about? No. Who wants to just get to the party, right? That's what we all want to do, really.
Resources.
You would like the resources back up again? Yeah.
Is there any way to use Jamf School together with Safe Internet and Protect simultaneously?
So the question was, is there a way to use Jamf School, Jamf Protect, and Safe Internet all together, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. It is just that simple, yes. Yeah, you can use all three of them because you've got Jamf Protect for your endpoint protection of the device, and then Safe Internet is doing your network protection. Yeah, so you absolutely can use all three of them together, yeah. Perfect.
Safe Internet integrates pretty easily as well.
Yeah.
I think it's just a few clicks to set up the connection between the Safe Internet radar and
That's right.
Jamf School.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a few clicks and Safe Internet is deployable really easy with Jamf School, that's right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll be about as well if you want any more, if you need to ask me anything else. And thank you again for coming. It's great.